Welcome everybody to the Vortex vlog. This is Aurora, and through this series we're going to be talking about the vortex that is the San Luis Valley, and specifically Crestone. And this is leading up to our Vortex Festival, which will be held in Crestone, Colorado on August 8th and 9th this year. So there's a lot to talk about as why the San Luis Valley is known for the weirdness that it is. It is one of the most unique places in the world. For many, many reasons. And one of those reasons that we're going to cover today is the Great Sand Dunes. And so I'm here at Zapata Falls, which is actually about 5 miles down the road from the Great Sand Dunes. But the Sand Dunes National Parks is kind of one of the great mysteries of the valley. So I wanted to share with you guys some of the history of the dunes. So if you do ever travel to the San Luis Valley, and if you are coming to the Vortex Festival, make sure to check out the dunes and Zapata Falls. It's located in Mosca, which is a small little town outside of Crestone. It does take about an hour's drive. But kind of the lore and the myth around the sand dunes is a little bit mysterious. So there was a great post actually shared in a local group that had some great history of the sand dunes. So basically, I'm just going to read you guys some of the myth here. So the entire region was once buried under one of the most catastrophic volcanic events in the history of the world. So between 40 and 25 million years ago, volcanoes actually erupted repeatedly across the southern Rockies, which spewed lava and ash for hundreds of miles. So the volcanic centers eventually merged into a single massive volcanic field that covered all of south central Colorado and New Mexico. The San Juan Mountains to the west weren't mountains in the traditional sense, but they are remnants of this volcanic eruption. So some of the largest volcanic explosions in Earth history happened right here. You can kind of see the sand dunes just behind me. And the evidence of the calderas is basically what you see carved into this side of the mountains. Now, if you look at the valley floor, which the San Luis Valley, it is mostly covered as almost a high desert sand. And the rift began forming about 28 million years ago when a massive graben started sinking along the faults. So the ground started peeling apart. So the Sangre de Cristos, which is the mountain range that runs through Crestone, Colorado, started to tilt and eventually sank. So that basin was filled with about 10,000 to 15,000 feet of volcanic rock and sediment. The flat floor that you see in the valley is actually the top of the lava and ash that occurred during this eruption. And there is actually a giant aquifer underneath of us. So again, another interesting part of the valley that makes it very unique and kind of mysterious is that we are a high desert. We're over 8,000 feet in elevation. But underneath of us is a massive aquifer. So the vast reserves of ancient groundwater are stored here. The aquifer is estimated at 140 million acres. So there is actually an ancient ocean beneath us that is kind of trapped beneath this volcanic rubble, if you will. Now, if we look at the sand dunes, most people, oh, sorry, the wind. Most people think that this is just a weirdly placed desert because you can see when you come here, it looks a bit out of place. And there's lots of different theories about how the sand ended up here, but about 70% of the sand in the dunes is volcanic in origin. It eroded off the San Juan Mountains over millions of years ago and got carried east by rivers and winds. And this also brings us to, if you look south towards Taos, which is right in the northern part of New Mexico, those freestanding mountains that you see along the southern edge are actually lava domes, and those erupted less than 3 million years ago. So all that volcanic activity actually created what is now known as the Colorado Mineral Belt, which contains gold and other minerals that brought tons of miners and fortunes into this region. Now, interestingly, NASA has been bringing astronauts out here since the 1960s to actually train in the Taos Plateaus. They practice lunar surface operations and rock sampling because the volcanic terrain looks much like the surface of other planets. So that's another interesting fact, is that NASA has been training here for decades, because the terrain here is so similar to off-world planets, like such as the moon, and also Mars. And so this makes it one of the most interesting. Now, if we go more into kind of modern history of the dunes, long before explorers and settlers kind of, came to this valley, the indigenous, of course, were here and were traveling and trading throughout the San Luis Valley. Now, Spanish explorers in the San Luis began here in the 16th century, but it wasn't until the mid-1800s that the town of San Luis was actually established. And over all of this time, what's interesting is that there is no written record of the sand dunes presence. So throughout the 1800s, of course, these settlers were doing travel routes through here and they started to form little pocket civilizations, and nowhere in those written records did anyone mention the sand dunes, which is kind of odd considering that it kind of sticks out wildly like a sore thumb. Now, the Great Sand Dunes eventually was mentioned when there was some explorers who came here after the Louisiana Purchase, and they crossed over one of the paths through the mountains of the Great Sand Dunes, and they did write about it. And so specifically, this was Lieutenant Pike who wrote that the sand dunes appearance looked exactly like that of a sea in a storm, except as to color. And this was the first kind of record here of the sand dunes. Now, the Great Sand Dunes National Monument was designated by Herbert Hoover in 1932, and this also went along to when they established like the Hoover Dam, and the Volcanic Mining Company actually did fight to have this as a preserved land, and they began to process and gold mine from the sand starting in 1932. So there is a lot of interesting things that come from the sand dunes. Now, the last thing that's very interesting is that on the northern side of the dunes, it actually borders cruststone. There is a back way that is not open to the public, but there is a back entrance from the dunes to cruststone. And in that part of the sand dunes, there is what's known as the Cruststone Crater. Now, this is from the Denver Gazette. This was an article written about the Cruststone Crater from 2021 by Leslie James. And she said that, dubbed the Cruststone Crater, which is a Colorado mystery that continues to intrigue scientists and outdoor enthusiasts, looks like a meteor impact, but there is no evidence of extraterrestrial rock that has to be found yet. Now, the crater itself, according to a study done in 1963, it is an elliptical bowl that measures about 355 feet by 246 feet, and it's about 23 feet deep. Now, historical documents detailed several eyewitness reports of a fireball actually crashing into the dunes in 1892, but the crater was not discovered until 1934 by a cruststone resident, actually. So they ended up doing a scientific study on this crater by Denver geologists in 1941. And he theorized that the crater was actually caused by a meteorite that crashed. But in 1963, there was a further investigation done by two people, Ursula Marvin and T.C. Marvelin, and they revealed that there was no signs of meteor impact, and they said that their theory was that this was formed by the wind. And obviously the crater's still there, and so you would think if it was formed by the wind, it would have eventually kind of eradicated itself. Now, recently there was an observation done by the National Park Service, and they did acknowledge the possibility of a meteorite impact and considered that the evidence was likely collected at the time of the crash could actually be buried beneath the sand. Whoop. Now, in Colorado, we actually do have a Colorado School of Mines, and the students there did a study on this crater, and they said it was a unique geophysical signature, and that their study showed evidence that contradicts that this was caused by wind, but that actually was an impact of some sort. So if the mysterious crater was a meteorite crash, it is unique because of its small size and the fact that it is still preserved in the sand to this day. Now, the study suggests that the characteristics of this crater are anomalies. So, the author of this article said, it is worth noting that many bizarre incidents that have occurred in the San Luis Valley are thought by some to be less than terrestrial. Could the mysterious cruststone crater actually be an imprint of an alien aircraft? And I'm sure most locals here in the San Luis Valley would probably agree that is a better theory. It probably was a meteor crash, or it could actually be some type of galactic or UFO ship. So if you guys are ever traveling to the San Luis Valley, or if you are going to come to the Vortex Festival on August 8th and 9th, please do check out the sand dunes as well as Zapata Falls. And while you're in the area, there's lots of other things to check out, such as the Hooper Hot Springs, which is right by the sand dunes, as well as the Mosca Distillery. So thank you guys for watching.